Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We spoke earlier today to Cole Evans, CEO of Enduro Metals. Small company, big optionality. If you want to hear our thoughts on that conversation and indeed the company itself, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports, market commentary from experts from around the world on a variety of commodities and companies. There are training videos. There are summaries of other interviews that we've done just to save you a bit of time. And of course, there's a thriving community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other. And if you go there now, you can sign up at cruxinvestor.com/club. And of course, we'd love your feedback too. So do give us a like, leave your comments below. And if you want to hear what we talked about, take a look at the description below. Cole, how are you doing, sir?
Excellent, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was the first time we've spoken. Oh, the long-awaited interview. I know. We've had a lot of people asking for us to talk, so I'm glad we are. We've not spoken before or I heard your story for us. I'm excited about that. So first of all, we've got to do some pleasantries. Where are you?
I'm in beautiful, I was going to say sunny Kelowna, but it's snowing here today. So
right.
Well, they advertise it as wine country, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've sampled the wine as well.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Oh, there you perfect.
Yeah.
Hopefully at a nicer time than November.
It was when I came over. It was summer on both occasions, which is wonderful. I hit it right. Didn't get to go to the lake though, so that sucked. What can you do?
Next time.
Hey, well, why don't you maybe kick off with a 1-minute summary of your story, and then I'll pick it up from there. Okay.
Yeah. So Enduro Metals, we're focused on the Newmont Lake project. It's 638 square kilometer project right up in what we call the heart or the center of northwestern British Columbia's Golden Triangle. Our focus, with a 638 square kilometer project, there's a number of different things going on there. We say 4 distinct systems. Currently in the near term, we're focused on high grade gold. But moving forward, we have copper and silver and a number of other things as we look on a longer term. But right now, focused on the McClymont Fault and high grade gold and some of the results that we've been putting out as of late.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you've got a big land package, a lot of targets, a lot going on. You're a junior, 50 million market cap. I'm intrigued. But first of all, to kind of start, help me unpick all of that and really get under the skin of it. Can you just talk to me about your business plan? I mean, when did you come in? Why did you come in? And what's your plan for the company?
Yeah, so that's a good question. To give you a kind of a comprehensive overview, is I first got involved, to increasing levels with this on the geological side back in fall of 2018, transitioned into 2019. And that was with a private company I have. It's called HEG, where HEG is the largest shareholder of Enduro today. It wasn't then, but essentially started out with our geological process. So put in about 150 grand just privately for my own due diligence, data research, and about a 4-month process, kind of what we do with companies. Really liked what we saw geologically. And continued to invest in the company throughout 2019. Come fall 2019, let's just say I wasn't too happy with how the company was going from a management perspective. So saw an opportunity about this time last year, 11 months ago, where I could come in and take over now as the largest shareholder and become CEO. Clean up the management team and build the company back for what is now Enduro Metals into how I thought the company should be running. And since then, it's been, we've had a really good year. Cleaning up the balance sheet of the company, that was an issue before. Bringing in new shareholders, big shareholders, some really strong people that are much smarter than myself, but. And then having a really successful exploration season that's come to an end now with winter here. But early results have come out thus far, and a lot more to come. But getting a little more focused on the business plan as you're talking about, our main goal right now, or in the near term, so to speak, is remaining focused on high grade gold. Like you said, on a property of our size, We have multiple areas that are prospective. The way I look at it is there's 4 distinct geological systems. Like I said, this is the Golden Triangle. The type of environment you're in, you should be seeing multiple systems like we're seeing. We're focused on the Climont Fault right now because that's where we see as driving, and we know the most about it. There's the most work there thus far that we can put together and build a real compelling, I don't even, story is important, but a deposit, right? Like we were chatting just before we got on the call, our goal is not to find, a small high-grade gold deposit. We're in the Golden Triangle. This is elephant country. This is where, the big deposits are found. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do. Now, that's a much longer time frame. So we're focused on where we think we can see the largest value increase for our shareholders in the near term and develop a strong, high-grade, near-surface gold deposit, particularly, obviously, as gold is performing in the markets. But moving on that longer term, I think you could see a stronger shift, particularly into the copper space as well.
Right. So that's what you want to be. I get it. Okay. But can I step back a bit? You mentioned a couple of things there which would, could be of concern. So you basically done a hostile takeover, right? In effect, right? You've kind of walked in there as a major shareholder, and you've kind of done a clean out of the management team. Did they all go?
Yeah.
Why?
We
what was your problem with them?
So I wasn't happy with how the company was being run. To be quite frank, I have a vision and an idea of how a proper resource company should be run, should carry themselves, and I didn't see that happening, and was unhappy with what or how the business was being run. And it kind of ties into the saying, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself, so to speak. And that was kind of how I felt. So, but we had a vision, and we have a vision for what this property is, what it can be, and tying in all the work that we've done prior to stepping in. I felt we were well prepared for the challenges that we were going to face, and like I said, cleaning up the balance sheet, a shareholder transition, bringing in mining people. That's what's critical, right? That's what we're here to find. Ultimately, we're not here to run a stock or anything like that. We're here to find a mine, plain and simple.
Okay, so the market reacted to that. They liked that story, but with that can come problems. Obviously, you've got a bunch of people who are slightly annoyed by your decision because they didn't agree with you. And that's the previous management team. So I'm looking at what's going on in the market now. You're a 50 million market cap company, right? So it's not big. You're a junior. You're in the right part of the world. You got some cash, which is great. And as you say, we'll talk about the share registry in a moment. But do you think that that's caused you a problem, that decision, that rashness of decision? You just say, right, everyone, you're off, go. Is that going to cause you any problems down the line? Have you just made a bunch of enemies?
I don't think so. I think any of those issues you could see from that have been dealt with. Put it in another way, I'm the kind of person that does a lot of homework. Months worth of homework. And if I'm going to do something, it's because I'm overwhelmingly confident in what I'm about to do. And if I'm not, I just simply won't do it, if that makes sense. So I don't see that being an issue. I think, like you said, you're looking at in the market, that's been reflective of that. But where the company was headed prior to, I think it was down at 10 cents or something like that when we'd first started making our moves. So, and with that, we've also inherited a lot of really good, strong shareholders as part of that. Making friends and all these sorts of things. So I think it's gone well. To be quite honest with you, I'd be Some days I sit there shaking my head and I'm thinking, what's going on in the market wise? But like I said, we had been eating through millions of warrants, which is of course topping up the company's treasury, but it's something that we've had to deal with in the market.
So I'm assuming those warrants are from previous management team. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, not necessarily just previous people, and you look at it from a perspective. So that company said just to talk about it because I think it's important. Where I saw an opportunity to come in and take over the company was on a financing they did around this time last year. That was I put $500,000 in that at 10 cents, and there was full 15-cent warrants. So I've been buying in the market even at 25 cents. I got 5 million warrants at 15. I got options way cheaper, right? But trying to clean up the structure a little bit. But you look for the people, of course, that went in on that private placement. I mean, they're looking at 2.5x, 3x gains, and then doubling on their warrants as well. So you can't blame people. They're trying to take money off. They're taking money off the table, right?
Well, they take money off the table if they don't think that you can deliver, right? Because you're telling a much bigger story than that, right? But we'll come on to that. So let's talk about this share registry. So you've got a new management team. Where are they from? What's so special about them? Have they done this before? Have they made shareholders money?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was starting with management. We talked a little bit about myself already. I'll get into the other people. We can talk more as you want. Like I said, throw the questions on. I enjoy it. So our CFO, Malcolm Davidson, he had a long tenure with the company of Silver. They were mainly a silver producer down in Mexico for a number of years. I believe it's 10 years, 8 or 9 years there. If you look at our board as well, and new people that we brought in, David Watkins, very well respected man, very successful, serially successful person, particularly in the copper industry. Lawrence Rolson, of course, Suzanne Hermans, and so we've changed the whole group around. Suzanne's an incredible resource, very very smart lady, and works for some significant companies and well versed in the industry. So. Like I said, it's that transition of bringing what I feel are mining people involved. And then, of course, looking at our shareholder registry as well. I'm the largest shareholder of the company, around 10%, I believe, on a partially diluted basis, wherever it sits. Rob McEwen, of course, now is our second largest shareholder. We had a very similar path getting in. We're investing in stages into the company. And then when I came and took over, we were very fortunate to have him, I think, quadruple his investment in the company just on our last finance we did closed at the beginning of August. So that transition is coming around. And I think as that's complete, that's when shareholders are going to start to do really well, and people will start to see what the bigger picture is. Because at the end of the day, we wouldn't have gone through this hassle and this process. And I've put over $2.5 million into it now at this point. Wouldn't have done that if I didn't feel it was worth it, of course, right? Like I said, if you're not overwhelmingly confident in your own abilities, or if you're not the biggest believer in yourself, how can you possibly expect anybody to believe in you, right? It would be immoral otherwise.
You'd be surprised. We see a lot of very confident people on this show that not necessarily capable, but say that that's the question I was going to ask you. Rob McEwen doesn't get into bed with anyone, right? So what was that conversation like when you spoke to him? What was the vision you were selling him? Or was it just the right part of the world? And he said, you know what, I agree with you. That management team, they didn't know anything. They didn't monetize this, but I think with my help, you can. What's it look like, that conversation? That's a great question. First, I think I'd say it's multiple conversations. Of course, Rob is a very, very thorough man and has gotten to where he is because of the process he has and the due diligence he carries on. So that was a multi-month conversation. Of course, multiple conversation, but and it essentially looks like, and I think beyond anything, it comes back to sharing a vision of, let's just call it location. I'm not going to say it's me. I'm not going to say it's anybody, right? I don't want to overstate any of those sorts of things. For me, and what I feel ultimately for everybody, it's about the project. It's about the prospect of finding something big,
that hasn't been found in a real long time in this area. And I feel we are the most well-positioned company there is to see those big KSM, Treaty Creek, Galore Creek-like discoveries. And that's what's really going to move the needle, in my opinion, for this company from where we're at now. We're obviously seeing lots of early success, which we're really excited about. But then that long term to where we want to be, we want to be the next household name, so to speak, of the Golden Triangle, and that's what's going to do it. And I think, like you said, that conversation with Rob McEwen, it's sharing that vision and sharing how are we going to get there. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen next month, but we have a plan in place. We have the geological, most importantly, always for me, we have the geological talent and vision that's going to take us to where we need to be.
Okay. Which is great. I mean, that again, that's a good story. And I'm because I've seen the press releases and the grades and stuff, I'm not going to give you a hard time about your ability to do that. I think you can. I really do. Mm-hmm. But what else has Rob brought along? Sorry to kind of get into the details here, but I like your story. So what else has Rob brought along in terms of the share register? I mean, are there any kind of other cornerstone or institutional which kind of steady the ship, as it were? Because it's like with juniors, when it's all retail, it's a pretty wild ride. Mm-hmm. So what does he help you with on that front?
Well, that's what we inherited, right? Was all retail. And that's a whole, so, and like I say to our retail shareholders, I don't think a resource company, of course, shouldn't work like that. You need to have institutions, you need to have pillars supporting your retail shareholders, not the other way around, or any pillars whatsoever, right? And so that's where that transition has been. Of course, Rob being a big one, I have to watch with everybody's confidentiality and sorts. That's one that's publicly known, and he's comfortable about it being publicly known. Unfortunately, I can't talk too much for other people's confidentiality sake on some of the shareholders we brought in. But I'll just point to that was we did an $11 million finance that was non-brokered in about 5 weeks. As our first finance coming in here, and I think in a whole, speaking for who those people are, ties back to what we were talking about before. It's bringing mining people. I can't go and tell you that there's a mine here today, right? But it's bringing a collective group of people who have been there, who have done it before, who've been successful in different metals, different parts of the world, and are all seeing the same thing, that hey, we have a real shot at finding something big here, and that's where the support is going to come from as we move forward. And looking, our market is trading pretty strong, and I think we traded nearly 100 million shares since the beginning of July. So that turnover is happening. Yeah.
Okay, we better talk about the asset, right? Don't get too much detail with you today. See, we keep saying you're sitting in the right part of the world. You seem saying Galore and SK, the pretty big projects, lots of drilling going on. So you got that for sure. But let's talk about some of your own results. You put out some press releases recently. So you want to maybe sort of talk through what's happening at McLynant and with regards to the gold focus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most exciting part for me. I mean, we actually just had a press release that came out this morning. So there's a couple different strategies for what we're going with here. Like I said, before we hop into everything, we do a tremendous amount of due diligence, data research, and all sorts of things, and applying new technologies to old problems, right? How do you truly rethink things, and not just say you're rethinking them, but show that you're rethinking them. And so that was a big focus of us over this last year in this last exploration program. It mainly comes down to a combination of new drilling further out to the northeast, this area we call the Northeast Extension, as well as reviewing back on previous historic drill holes that were within the heart of this historic resource area. So there's a historic resource that's called the Northwest Zone. It was all along the McClymont Fault. That was based on the first drilling on this property, which was in 1987 to 1990. It's very nice results even back then. I think their quote discovery hole was around 11.2 meters of 55 grams gold, and with associated silver and copper as well. Of course, you were at that time, I think, competing with the famous Eskay hole 109. It's still sure probably the best hole ever be drilled for high grade gold in the world. So stiff competition, let's say, right? But importantly is that area. Let's look at where we sit now versus where it was back then. You were 75 kilometers from the nearest road, hundreds of kilometers from power infrastructure. The story of the Golden Triangle, right? Now today we are drilling 16 kilometers away from a hydroelectric power plant, right? I mean, it's straight shot up the valley from it, and with, of course, the road sitting there and stuff. The bridges have been built, the switchbacks have been blasted, the heavy lifting has been done. So the economics are completely changed. But it goes back into, if we look at, I'll talk about the press release we put out this morning. It was 85 meters or 86 meters, sorry, of about 3 grams gold. That's adding a significant intercept directly below where gold was already known. Again, starting right at surface, right? It's starting at 7 meters, which is the casing. It's literally, you're standing on it when you're there. It's done by a little bit of what we were talking about prior to the call getting started, some of the hyperspectroscopy, different technologies we're using at improving what is known in what I feel is a significant way, but ultimately expanding the area. We go back to our press release from a couple of weeks ago. It was titled 8.85 meters of around an ounce, just over 31 grams gold, with 1% copper involved in that. What's important for investors to understand there, but that's over 300 meters away. Again, along this fault, like I tell people, there's very common, or I should say, there's a number of boxes that you can check. If you look at gold camps around the world, there's a number of observations you can make, similarities, so to speak, that you can see in all of these camps, right? And I use Timmins as an example for this one. When you're in the Timmins camp, of course, a world-class gold camp in Northern Ontario, there's something called the Dester-Porcupine Fault, right? It's this big structure that cuts right through and is associated with all the gold deposits along there. Because what it comes down to, gold moves around these fluids. Well, no different than the pipes in your house, hydrothermal fluids, fancy word for hot water, right? They need space to move. They need a conduit. And that's what these big structures represent. And the McClymont Fault is ours. This is over 20 kilometer long regional structure. It's massive. You can see it from satellite imagery. But no different than in how it would work in Timmins or anything like that is you don't want to be right on the structure. You want to be just off the side, right? You have a pathway for metal to move, but it's got to settle somewhere, right? Think of it no different than the relationship with a river and a lake. Water moves through the river, but it needs somewhere to settle. It needs somewhere to concentrate. That's what we're targeting. And that's where taking, that's just a very simplified way of looking at it, but taking these different concepts. And now we're starting to see where we're hitting big holes well outside of any historic resource work that's, of course, more or less irrelevant at this point today. Relatively, we're 150, 160 meters down. Look at any high-grade gold deposits today where you're drilling and where you're working. We've scratched the surface, so to speak, in what's known. And importantly, going back to those two comparisons, is it's a completely different mineralization style. And I talked about this a lot between the two press releases, particularly if you go back and read the quote from the press release of our 8.85 meters of 31 grams gold, and you read that carefully, and what it is it's a totally different geological environment. Or I shouldn't say totally different. It's related. It's a different style of mineralization. That's what's important. These skarns that we're seeing, the near surface mineralization, it has to come from something, right? They're secondary. They need an ultimate source. That's what we're starting to see as we move further northeast out of the system, where we're getting these higher grades. They're a little bit deeper, again, relative, they're still quite shallow. But it ties back to our bigger goal, our longer term goal of we're in the Golden Triangle. We're in these arc environments where all these different deposit types that you see around, they're all related, right? These are well-established geological theories of how these things are all related. And what we're doing is putting those puzzle pieces together, right? Because we've assembled the land package to do so and the right people to do it.
So what are you doing differently? Because you're saying it's well-established. The previous management team would have known, they would have been thinking the same way. You just got quite animated about the geology, which is great, but I think all geologists get excited about the geology. So what is different about the way that you're coming out? Why is the interpretation different? Because if I look at the reaction in the marketplace, and you may be dealing with some still leftover legacy issues here, your share price didn't move, right? Nothing. And that either says the market doesn't care, doesn't understand, or as you say, maybe this warrant overhang situation is causing you issues. So what do you think the market needs to know so that you can kind of blast through this kind of apathy?
Yeah, no problem. I'll tell you what, I'll give you the personal touch here. Do you want me to share screens with you? Can we do that in these interviews?
We can do that. We're going to go high tech here, guys. Stand back.
Okay. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you an important image here. Take this we first put this out about 5-6 months ago. So to give you an idea of how we feel confident our theories and what we're doing is where it can lead to. Let's say this is a long section of the McClymont Fault. So you can see a plan view sitting here, right? Just in that, where I'm running my cursor over is the fault right here. And then we can see some IP anomalies in the pink. This is basically what you have going on. There's your work from 1987 to 1990. Okay, well constrained, high grade gold near surface. That's great, right? Like I said, we're not looking for a gold quarry. We're looking for an elephant. That's what we're here. But I noticed something that was interesting where we had this overlap is you can see the mineralization is plunging down into the hill, right? This IP, this charge is picking it up. These lines here, back then when they did that, they could only penetrate about 80 to 100 meters down, right? Well, if your mineralization is plunging down into the hill and this blue line here is your topography, you're going up the hill, well, it's going to look like it stops because, of course, your lines just aren't getting to where they need to be, right? They essentially need to be coming down and touching this white line here. So what did we do to start? We went way outside with of course, we have the advantage of 21st century technology and in techniques. We went way outside and we put deep lines down and said, oh, geez, we're picking it up well 650 meters away. So what did we start doing? We started drilling in through here. And that's where you're seeing the results that we're putting forward now, particularly hole 9, that 8.85 meters of 31 grams gold. That was out in this area, right, within about 10, 15 meters of the depth that we predicted it would be sitting at. So it goes back into that same theory where this is where you need to be. And high grade gold's tough, right? You got to keep in mind how tight these things can be. And, we're fortunate in doing the data and the style that we have that, you get a lot of smoke and then you get to the point where you say, look, if there's too much smoke for there not to be any fire. And I think now we're starting to show people that there's fire and it's right where we were saying that there should be fire. And again, keep in mind, look at the scale, right? That's 1,500 meters across. So we're talking about big systems.
Is that where, how much money are you allocating to continue to try to understand what you've got there in terms of the drill bit?
Well, as much as we can. That's our main focus, of course, right? That's how we feel is going to move the company forward. We'll probably, we haven't announced anything yet as far as plans for 2021, but we had a multi-million-dollar exploration program this year our money's funneled into the field. That's where we like to do our work. Now, as we've come out of there, now we're going to be really working on moving forward and building our shareholder base, building the story up. We've only touched such a small group of people thus far. Hence, it's our first interview together and things like that. So, getting our story out there, getting more eyes on it, letting more people understand what's going on. But ultimately, it all, as much as we can, goes into the ground. That's what's going to move this thing. Not talking about it, but actually putting out results.
Because who are you actually targeting? Because if I look at some of the questions sent in, people are going, "Hey, this guy doesn't do nearly enough promotion." But who's the audience you really want to be talking to? Because, as you say, spending money, putting money in the ground, everyone wants a bit of that. I think the retail want you to be talking to them a little bit more than you do. But what's the reality of who you really want to be listening to this?
Well, every shareholder is important. Number one, right? Doesn't matter if I know everyone's going to tell you that, but I honestly, I spend a lot of time, even, shareholders, some text me and all sorts of stuff or whatever. Right. So I do mean that in a sincere way, but ultimately you need to target the groups of people and the mining people that can really be that support for the retail shareholders. Like we talked about before, you need pillars, and that's what we're working on. That's what we're putting in place. These are, let's look at it from a broader market perspective, right? And talk about the kind of companies that have been moving into the Golden Triangle the last couple of years, the amount of cash that they're going to have, that they already are amassing, that they're going to have by the end of 2021. I mean, it's billions and billions of dollars. Look at Newcrest as an example. You talk with the gold price moving. Forget Cadia Valley and their flagship asset. I just look at balance sheets of companies like that, and take here in PNG, right? Go back 2 years ago, that's an asset that was essentially, breaking even, let's say, 850,000 ounce per year production. Okay, well, if we just even took an average of $1,800 gold in the last year, when you look at their production, that all of a sudden went from being a break even on the balance sheet to, another $450-500 million in the till. Those are the kind of swings. That's that kind of cash balance, that they're going to get top heavy. And ultimately, this is a story I'm sure all of your investors are very well versed in. And any mining company out there is just depleting resources. At some point in time, they're forced to transition. And we want to show to those, I just use them as an example, of course, right? Not narrowing down to any specific thing, that when that inevitable transition needs to come, Enduro is positioned to be the front runner. And hey, the big boys, they want to be here because they can make money.
So who do you think has done it well? Okay, who do you want to be like? Because at this point, it's kind of an interesting point here. You've got some money. You'll eventually spend that money, and you're going to need to raise that money, hopefully at higher share price. Okay, that's the kind of model, and you're going to have to do that for a long time because you're after big targets. You're going to have to. Some of the people either side of you have spent, tens, if not hundreds of millions on drilling alone. Okay. But are there models out there you think, hey, I kind of like the way that Great Bear's done it? No resource yet, but it's fine. The market totally gets it now. Or you're kind of like a Pure Gold. Well, hey, again, they've done it a different way. They've done lots of raising. They brought in institutional, but they've been putting out the resource numbers and going through the step process. So they're polar opposites. But in terms of valuations, it's kind of interesting. So how do you tackle that side of it? You got really animated when we started talking about geology, but how excited are you about the financing?
Well, we don't need to finance anytime
Not anytime soon, but you will have to at some point. Point.
No, fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
So who does that and what's the plan?
Yeah, okay. So like I said, just so I'm clear, we're not financing. We
I hear you.
Need to finance at any point in time. But yeah, moving down that longer term look. I don't want to give too much away at this point of what those plans look like. Like I said, there's a reason why we're focused on high grade near surface gold in the short term versus the copper, right? Like if you look at the company's trajectory previously, it didn't
look so good. Didn't look as good as it should. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah.
You gotta focus on, okay, what's going to make money in the near term at the lowest cost possible, right? So like I said, there's a reason why we're focused on the gold right now. We know of a lot of other things going on the property, and that's the whole story's getting tied together and is going to be shown to people. But yeah, what can we do that we're not going out and, I say, we're chasing, elephants, but also not just, emptying the kitty, drilling holes all over the place without any logic or intellect, right?
Okay, so you got, okay, not quite there yet, because I get the focus, because you could go and blow your money on all 4 assets, right? You could just blow and not have very much data. So positive gold environment, gold's the price doing what it's doing at the moment, fantastic. People are excited about gold stories. So you're going after the gold, sure, makes sense. But at some point you'll have spent your capital, you're going to have to keep drilling. And where do you take that? Do you just keep drilling until you prove out a global resource which is attractive to majors, or are you bringing a strategic in? I mean, I'm trying to understand the mentality of the way you approach this, because you've got 3 other quite big targets to go for.
Great question. Okay. All right. I'll give you a little more. All right. So focus on the high grade near surface gold to start, right? This is what, in particularly things that are going to be easier to go into production, right? Of course, a big porphyry deposit, it's going to take years, environmental studies, all these sorts of things, permitting, tailings, yada, 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 the list goes on, right? That's the long-term trajectory. What's our goal in the near term? Focus on the high-grade gold, developing a resource, whether that be, I don't want to get too much, away at this point, whether that be bringing in a mining partner, joint ventures, percentage owners. We'll make the right decision at the time of what makes sense for our shareholders, right? What's going to see our shareholders make the most value. Once you get up into that, and the fire alarm's going off in the building right now. Once the hopefully that's just a test. Once I got to watch my forward-looking statements and saying, of course we don't know anything for certain, right? This is mineral exploration, right? But presumably getting to that stage or ability to start cash generating, then okay, we have the rest of the land secured. Now we're able to start going after these bigger things without diluting the crap out of the company and our shareholders. Because like I said too, ultimately, selfishly speaking, I'm the largest shareholder. I don't want to be diluted, right? I want to make money just like everybody else. So does that make sense?
It's an answer.
It's an answer.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Question for you on some of the drilling. Not all your drill results are back yet. What percent is back, and what percent, and therefore, why are the rest outstanding?
Yeah, so that's definitely been a short-term challenge for us. Has been and I know it's probably a similar story with a lot of the other exploration companies you talk to. Lab backup has been a huge issue this year. Essentially, of course, COVID and is one reason, but also just the increased activity and things like that. But in saying that, we have had some things slowly started trickling back. The press release we put out a couple of weeks ago was on a rushed assay, so hence we got that earlier. The press release we put out this morning was on some early sampling that we did of historic core while drilling was getting set up. So that has started trickling in now. We started seeing soil samples and things like that from that early field work starting to trickle in. So while I, of course, can never put exact timelines to anything, that process is coming through, and I see an influx of samples coming through in the near term and assays for our shareholders to see.
So there's nothing untoward there. It's just a question of, like everyone else, struggling with the assay return.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's been a long and frustrating process, to be frank, from our side of things. But it is what it is, and you just gotta bite your tongue with it.
And it's kind of, again, early days here, but where can we get kind of the full drill results? Because obviously we're getting the highlights here, from.
Yeah.
Where do we get that?
So actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really good point. Something we're creating right now is we're putting together a whole a 3D viewer database of what's particularly our new results and things, and kind of like that section I showed you just earlier there. All the data through there, and that way people can actually go in and click through and look at things themselves and say, oh, hey, here's a hole from 1987 that was drilled to 50 meters, and the last sample was 2 meters of an ounce. That looks interesting. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And I think that'll be good for people, but they can simply kind of start wrapping their head around what we're talking about and what that bigger picture looks like. So yeah, that is something that we are working on and updating our website.
Okay. Where do you make your money?
Working really hard.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, no. Well, geez. The whole back, I've probably had a constant job since I was 13 years old, starting back at, paper routes before that, starting back at Canadian Tire. But no, going through that, I got really big into investing when I was young, when I was a kid, particularly in energy type stuff, silver, and all sorts of different things, and was fortunate to be successful from there. On the investing side, from a private business side, our COO Dylan Hunko and I started a private exploration services company called HEG. It's kind of more grown into, while it is still an exploration services company, I really call it a data company now at this point. We got a lot of people constantly. I cringingly say the first gold mine is in the government data that hasn't been touched, but. So we've been really fortunate and work with some large mining clients, some international, worldwide names in companies, and helping them move projects forward at a variety of different scales, and it's gone very well for us. We've been very fortunate.
So money primarily from, unless the paper round was well paid, primarily from HEG, right? Okay. Fine. Is that still in operation? Is that still an operating business? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm more or less. I'm not involved with the day to day at this point really anymore. But we service a number of clients, and then of course that building and investing with that, we invest in things that we think have legitimate shot of being a good project, right? And no different than how Enduro came to be.
Working with your buddies can't be bad. One last question: you're in this for the long haul?
Absolutely. But I'll put it to you this way. I put this to one of our shareholders who's a big hockey player, and I said it's the same analogy. A hockey, of course, using the Canadian way of looking at it. Every kid grows up that wants to be a hockey player. They don't grow up wanting to be a hockey player because they're gonna make a bunch of money and get a playoff bonus and things like that. They do it because they want to win the Stanley Cup. And I said to this gentleman, I said, did you make it to where you did because you were chasing that playoff bonus, or did you do it because you wanted to win the Stanley Cup? Right? And I think we know what the answer is. It's before the business, before an investor, before anything like that, I'm a geologist, and I'll always try and think of myself that way. Mineral exploration is our game. Newmont Lake is our arena, and finding a mine is our Stanley Cup. In the process of getting there, or deposit mine, whatever you want to say, in the process of getting there, we will do well. We will all do well, but it's remaining focused that is the goal. And that helps keep you, I think, in that long-term mindset. It's easier, of course, for myself in deals to have that long-term approach and to be locked in, because it ties back to what we said before. You need to be the biggest believer in yourself. And if you're not, don't expect anybody else to believe in you, right? It's easier for me to say that than for, a retail shareholder who's looking at the stock every morning and watching every little fluctuation and getting nervous and things like that. So, and I don't blame anybody for that sense. It's harder when you're not immersed into it to be able to stay along and see what that long term is. But
okay, cool. That does. Cool. I appreciate that. It's a really interesting story. Like I said, we did a fair bit of work before we got on a call with you, because we were meant to have got together on a couple of other occasions, but here we are today. Nice story. Well done. Stay in touch. You got some good stuff coming up. I suspect a lot more drilling results, and pick up the phone and let us know how you get on, okay?
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Matthew.